Thank you for joining us as we complete another epic conference with an exciting panel focused on financial wellness and employment. My name is Samantha Sandassie, and among the many hats I wear, I'm the Director of Education and Training at AgeWell and the Platform Manager for our CIHR-funded Epic AT Fellowship Program that's powered by AgeWell and hosted at the University of Toronto. I'll be chairing this super exciting seventh session of the EPIC conference entitled Aging with Security, Financial Wellness, Employment, and Digital Inclusion for Older Canadians. Today's session brings together perspectives on the financial realities facing older adults, and this includes things like poverty, retirement readiness, and the growing need for continued employment. This panel will explore the critical role of digital literacy in enabling workforce participation and protecting against cyber risks. I'm excited to introduce our three expert EPIC conference panelists, and we will enjoy three 5-minute presentations from them that will frame our discussion panel. After their presentations, we'll have a bit of a roundtable where I'll be asking questions of the panelists, and then we'll conclude with a general Q&A where you, the audience, ask the panelists your questions. Then, to close things off, Dr. Alex Mielides, who needs no introduction, our former CEO and founding scientific director at AgeWell, will join us to officially close the EPIC Conference 2026 with his closing remarks. Now, before we begin today's session, I'd like to note that all attendees are encouraged to use the Q&A box located on the Zoom toolbar to ask questions, leave a comment on a question, and upvote questions that others have submitted that you'd like to have them answered. We also welcome you to use the chat and have a conversation with the other attendees here. This session is being recorded and will be available for playback later. Links to the playback will be posted on the EPIC Conference webpage and the AgeWell YouTube channel. Should you choose, you can enable closed captioning for Zoom on the Zoom toolbar. Now, without further ado, let's begin with a presentation by Emily Jones-Joannis, who's a co-founder and CEO of Connected Canadians, a national digital inclusion charity, and an assistant professor at Carleton University's Sprott School of Business. Emily, I'd like to invite you up on the virtual stage with me and share your screen.
Hi, everyone. Let me just grab my screen here. And can everyone see that all right?
Looks great.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Well, so nice to be on here. Thanks for inviting me today. My name's Emily. I started Connected Canadians after many years of volunteering with seniors and also working at a few charities that were focused on digital skills for women and for youth. And I couldn't find anyone serving older adults on a national level. And I thought that really needed to change as older adults need to be able to have digital literacy skills just as the rest of the world does. And we started in 2018. Many of our folks who work with us, many of our volunteers who support us are new immigrants to Canada, and they are highly skilled in technology. And so working with our seniors gives them a wonderful reason to connect and to build community connections, while at the same time not only helping with digital literacy skills, but also reducing social isolation and loneliness, which as you may know, is also a huge part of the problem with scams and frauds. So just to let you know a little bit more about what we do, we have well, first I'll start a little bit about fraud and financial wellness. So we know that older adults are disproportionately impacted by financial fraud, and we are actively working to combat this. So when we're teaching someone to recognize a scam message or a fake website, we're not just teaching tech, we're actually preventing direct financial harm. So digital financial literacy is no longer just a nice to have. It's truly important for everybody. And we really want to make sure that older adults are included in this. So this is just to give you a sense of where Connected Canadians works. We have over 220 partnership agreements in place across Canada. That number feels like it's growing every day. A lot more signatures in my inbox, but in 2025, we actually launched a cyber safety first aid program. This one, came up with because of having taken the mental health first aid program with when I was working with youth populations, and I recognized that not only older adults themselves, but also caregivers and folks who are supporting older adults need to be informed of how best to help older adults and make sure that there is no shame involved when someone is actually compromised. And so just not only preventing, but also helping folks come back from a financial scam or fraud. This program actively helps on all of those areas. And so we have multiple streams of cyber safety first aid, which protect not only the older adults so they can do the training, or those who are supporting them to be able to best recover and also help prevent further situations like that. We also have a variety of cyber safety workshops. And all of these things are provided free of charge to seniors. So if you have folks that you think would be interested in cyber safety first aid, please get in touch. We would love to hear from you. We want to make sure that more people stay safe and help others stay safe online. And this is thanks to RBC, TD, and Desjardins, and a number of other folks that have helped us fund these programs and make them available to older adults across Canada. Yeah, we've been really busy the past few years. We've supported thousands of seniors. We have over a 97% customer satisfaction rate. We've completed over 9,000 one-on-one sessions with clients and over 800 workshops. With thousands, I think it's close to 15,000 participants. Yes, as I mentioned, we still have cyber safety first aid licenses available for those who are interested. Both if you are communities and you have folks interested, please do get in touch. So happy to provide any other information later in the Q&A, but that's just a quick overview of CC and hopefully lets you know a little bit more about me and who we are.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Emily, for that overview. Next, I'd like to invite up Anne-Marie Levy, who holds a Master's of Science and a PhD in Neuroscience and Applied Cognitive Science, and serves as a lecturer in the Faculty of Science and as a research associate at Wilfrid Laurier University, Brock University, and UHN. Anne-Marie, please turn on your camera and share your slides.
I literally just lost my camera. Now it's showing me I've enabled it and everything, and it just has disappeared on me. So I might just share my screen. I will share my screen and do my presentation and then work on it during the next presentation. I apologize for the tech difficulties.
No worries.
Okay. Let me know when you can see some slides up there.
Slides are visible.
Excellent.
Slides are no longer visible.
Oh dear. Okay.
Now I see your home screen.
Is that okay? Can you see some slides there?
Perfect.
Excellent. We still okay?
Back to your home screen, unfortunately. And now back to your slides.
Okay. I seem to be having some technical difficulty all of a sudden.
That is okay. Anne-Marie, how about you work on your technical difficulties and maybe we can move on to Michelle and circle back to you?
Sounds like a good idea. I'm gonna sign in and out of the meeting. Sorry about that.
No worries. All right, I'm back. Michelle, please, thank you for joining me up on stage. Michelle Silver is a professor at the University of Toronto, and several of her works really focus on retirement. So I'm really excited to hear more from her in our discussion today when we talk about retirement, when we talk about being financially ready and what it means. So Michelle, please take it away.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much. I hope I'm visible enough.
You are.
Okay, terrific. Thanks. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. And I want to start off just by saying that when we're thinking about aging with security, it's well understood that life goals are moving targets, and it's important not to forget that you are the driver. And I want to just briefly like share a little bit of suggest is, oh, I see. Sorry, I haven't fully shared there. Um, is that I want to point out that there's a gap between the average life expectancy and the average retirement age. And in some work that I've done, I've looked across these different colored data points or different regions of the world, and there's a notable increase between the amount of time that we are living and our expectations about retirement. And of course, this has major implications for security, financial security, and just like understandings of where we're at in life and expectations about our final chapters. Um, a big takeaway here is that if we are expecting to retire at the average retirement age, which of course, does have quite a bit of fluctuation, for women, like we're looking at like an extra 2 decades of time where we're not engaged in the structure that we knew before and other life changes. So in some work for a book I wrote called Retirement and Its Discontents, I explored a very particular reaction to retirement for those whose personal identities and work identities were deeply intertwined. So you can see that some of the chapters here. So I had the opportunity to do some studies looking at CEOs, at high performance athletes, at academics, at a really wide range of different folks, including homemakers. So a lot of stereotypes and expectations um, were sort of set aside, but the key was this connection between work and really who you are and what you expect from life. And one subset of that work was looking at physicians that I drew for the book, but that I've also written about in academic papers. And this subset of work looks at physicians and how their commitment and focus on work can really exacerbate their planning for retirement and their experience of retirement. So lots of takeaways there, even if you're not a physician. Usually when I present to physicians, they love hearing about the high performance athletes. So I just share that as a little bit of background. That work really led into my most recent book, which is called Aging with Agility, and that really explores the importance of taking care of your own body, but in ways that are really meant to understand that we all have very different types of bodies and very different types of relationships with aging and with exercise and with our own perceptions about aging and how those influence the extent to which people engage and or feel motivated to exercise in the way that's possible for their own body. So I'll leave it at that for now and stop sharing and look forward to continuing.
Thank you, Michelle. I feel like you and I need to have a conversation about this as I start thinking about retirement too. Anne Marie, how goes the tech challenges over there? I see you. Now unmute.
I'm back in, so let's see if the share will work.
Perfect.
Fingers crossed you've got some slides up there.
We have slides right now.
Amazing. Okay, I'm so sorry for the delay there. So thank you, Sam, for the introduction and the opportunity to present today. So today I'm going to be telling you a bit about our work on cognitive inclusion with the aging workforce. So globally and in Canada, we know that workers age 55 and up are the fastest growing segment. In Canada, we've got 1 in 5 people who are over the age of 55 working. Older adults are choosing to remain in the workforce well beyond the age of retirement now. There's a variety of reasons contributing to this. For one, life expectancy is rising. People are staying in school longer, marrying later, having kids later. And people just realize working longer keeps them, more skilled and keeps them in connection with people. There's lots of value there. And then very practically, mandatory retirement has been abolished in a lot of professions, and the age to receive government pensions is also rising globally. So together, there's like a mix of lifestyle, society, and financial pressures that are keeping people at work longer. These demographic and labor force kind of changes, though, are also highlighting the benefits of having a multi-generational workforce. Research finds that older workers really contribute. They contribute by mentoring younger employees. They reduce turnover. They help retain expertise, and they can help lower hiring and training costs. So together, these benefits collectively really make a strong business case for why organizations have to find ways to support an aging workforce. So over the past 8 years, our programs of research have really been focused on this exact question. Our newest research program includes Age Smart AI, and we completed the Age Well-funded Cog at Work program of research at the end of 2024. And I'm just going to tell you little tidbits about both of those today. So Age Smart AI is a SSHRC-funded research program. We're just beginning it now, and we're examining how healthcare providers in particular are using AI-based tools to support their daily work. And this research is actually laser focused on unsanctioned AI tools. And what I mean by that are those are any tool that an employee might use to do their work that isn't approved or without the knowledge of their organization. So for example, if you use your personal smartphone at work, either to use a WhatsApp messenger to communicate about work-related things, or you're using Google to Google something related to work, or asking ChatGPT a question, all of this is unsanctioned AI use. And so what we find is that employees are using these tools and they're integrating them in their everyday workflow, really to improve efficiency and kind of fill gaps. But a key focus of this research is really on how kind of age and career stage are going to intersect with how people choose to engage with these tools and adopt these tools on a day-to-day basis. And we're taking a particular look at the healthcare sector because many individuals in the sector, as we've learned, they stay well beyond their retirement age. And their institutional knowledge is really an asset. But there's this kind of growing divide. I've done interviews with dozens of healthcare workers now, and there's this sense that some people are really challenged and they're even choosing to retire early because they're really challenged by the, rapid introduction of all these new digital technologies in the workplace. Whereas there's another group who's really choosing to embrace that and taking on things like unsanctioned AI tools to help sustain their jobs and their longevity there. So this new program of research is going to start with a large national survey of about 400 healthcare workers across Canada. And we're going to build on that with some qualitative work by going into clinical settings and doing a lot of in-depth interviewing. But this work really builds on our Cog at Work project, which explored how kind of the policies, practices, and technologies organizations have at their disposal influence cognitive inclusion of older adults in the workplace. So here our goal is really to help organizations learn how they can develop supports for people who might develop cognitive impairments on the job. So we know as people work longer, some cognitive changes, like, declining your memory or your processing speed, there's a lot of that comes along with just the normal processes of aging. But for some people, that really goes beyond typical aging. And then we move into the realm of people who are diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment or a form of dementia. And those changes, like changes in memory, kind of focus, decision-making, planning, personality, language skills, all of these things really interfere with the ability of someone to do their normal job tasks. But despite a diagnosis of this, people are entitled to accommodations for this. But what's happening is people are self-selecting out of the workforce early. They're choosing retirement, or worse, their performance managed out. And this is obviously negative for both organizations and the employee, who often suffers financial and personal consequences. And so we conducted 2 major case studies on this. We interviewed over 96 people over 5 years. And I'm not going to get into the details of it, but we identified both enablers and barriers to accommodating people and creating a cognitively inclusive workspace. So some of those included having managers who are too overloaded to accommodate, or organizations that were highly bureaucratic with highly centralized decision-making. So, middle managers couldn't make decisions to help accommodate on their own. They needed a lot of, to go through a lot of red tape. Thankfully, we also identified a lot of enablers. So empathic leadership styles. So managers who basically fostered social support, they reduced strain, they created a psychological safety net, and that let employees disclose their needs. And when you disclosed, it always led to some form of accommodation and sustained employment. So across both of these, we looked at also the role of technology, and we found a mixed bag of digital and non-digital tech that helps support cognitive inclusion in the workplace for older adults. And bottom line was tech was helpful if it was adaptable and flexible and quite familiar to employees who needed to use it. But it became less helpful and more of a barrier if there were a bunch of barriers to being able to adopt it into the organization. So safety or privacy risks, or there wasn't enough money for it, or people just didn't know what type of tech to support cognition in the workplace. So across both of them, technology had both positives and negatives. On that note, I'd like to acknowledge all the principal investigators who helped with all this work and colleagues, and most importantly, the late Jessamine McMurray, who was the visionary architect and the mind behind both Cog at Work and HSmart AI. Cog at Work has had a pretty massive impact on the two organizations we were working with, thankfully, and that's entirely attributable to her passion and commitment to it. I'm going to stop there, Sam.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank you for that shout out for Josephine as well. I was thinking of her as I opened the session and thinking about her, her work with Age-Well over the past 11 years. Just absolutely, indisputably, one of the most important individuals we've ever worked with in the network. Her lasting impact it's real. It's real. Now, I'm going to ask you, Anne-Marie, to stop sharing screen, and I'm going to ask Michelle and Emily to join us on our virtual stage, as I've been calling it. Hope you're ready with coffee, because I have a bunch of questions for you that
Has the share stopped on my end, Sam?
No, you've started sharing screen again.
Oh, it has. The tech continues. There we go.
There we go. All right. Now the four of us are on screen and we are ready to go. So I have a few questions, as I said, and I'm really excited to see where this conversation takes us. So if I meander, please do forgive me. My first question is really about setting the context and, what does it mean when we think about financial security and we think about aging? Because we know that there are over 8 million older adults in Canada, defined as 65 plus, and that's 20% of the population. So looking at you, Michelle, and then maybe over to Anne-Marie next, what do you see as the most significant and perhaps maybe under-recognized financial challenge facing older adults today in Canada specifically? Like, how are rising costs, changing retirement patterns, caregiving responsibilities reshaping the experience of aging and retirement?
Yeah, I would say, it's pretty simple. The main point would be outliving your money, that is, we're living longer, and some of us are living longer with more complex life and health situations. And so figuring out how to address those when they come up. So if we need, assistive care or assistive devices, those can get really costly, especially in those final years. And, the real kicker is that it's really hard to predict these days. I think it's as we're living longer, it's getting harder and harder to predict how much longer we have left. In a way, it's a great problem to have. But the key takeaway would be outliving your money. And the second quick point would be just addressing sense of purpose issues, addressing how to adapt to lack of structure. But I would say those are kind of the secondary ones, although I love exploring those further. But I might pass it along there.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Anne-Marie, you're next.
Yeah, to build on all of those excellent responses, I think there is a growing understanding of the role of cognition and being able to live well. We can live longer, and we've got lots of healthcare and lots of new ways to keep the bodies going. But when you lose your ability to engage and you become socially isolated because of cognitive impairment, or you can't work anymore, a lot of those things just disappear. And then with that comes your connection to the world. And I think that a growing awareness to being more open and inclusive of cognitive impairment in the workplace, and also the community, dementia-friendly communities, et cetera, I think will create a bigger opening for people to talk about these earlier. People are being diagnosed much earlier because we have incredible new tools to diagnose people under 65. So this is not just a issue for someone who's 65 and up. I interviewed dozens of people in their 40s and 50s who were on the cusp of diagnoses and life-changing experiences because of that. And so the impact of that on people is quite profound, and the rates are rising for a multitude of reasons. So I think opening up that space is a big one. And then considering the caregiver impact, because it's not just you who's diagnosed, your caregiver is now full-time, or your partner or your family is now full-time caregiver, almost always. And so the workplace implications and life implications there are huge. So more focus on that, I think, is a necessity.
Thank you, Anne Marie. And to jump in on that, when I think of the sandwich caregiver as well, the person my age, the millennial who's caregiving not just for older parents, but then also for their young children as well. And I speak from personal experience there. It is hard. It is hard. Emily, did you have a point to add to this discussion?
I mean, I think on my end, I see such a variety of seniors. We work with folks, and I think obviously the ones on the lower end of the income scale, folks living in community housing and such, sometimes just getting a device and getting online can be a major stressor. But I would say still overall, over finances, over anything, it's more of a psychological barriers are the biggest thing that I see at Connected Canadians. Over more of the financial side of things, although certainly we do experience folks who reach out who are struggling with that too.
Absolutely. So, Emily, I'm going to stick with you a bit because I've been thinking about your work at Connected Canadians and wondering, as more Canadians work later in life, whether by a choice or necessity, as we've discussed, what opportunities and challenges do you see emerging for older workers? Like, how can technology actually support meaningful, productive, inclusive workforce participation?
I think that comes back to the design of the technology in question. I think we have a definite issue with the fact that many of the folks designing technology are folks in their 20s and 30s, often male, who are not thinking about, older men and women who are still in the workforce who need to use the tools that they're producing. And so I think being able to actually create tools, co-create them with older adults in the room, is a huge opportunity, and can in fact help older adults to continue to remain in the workforce and also to continue to use technology effectively once they have retired, and just sort of paying attention to that, being really aware. I think universal design, all of those things need to be considered so much to be able to help our older folks, be able to stay productive and just be able to remain part of our digital society on an ongoing basis. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Digital society is a really interesting way to put it because society is now increasingly digital, right? But I want to go back to Anne Marie there for a second. When I was thinking about the role technology can play in extending meaningful workforce participation, and then what Emily was just saying about co-creation, can you speak a little bit about the work that your projects have been doing in this space?
Yeah, I would like to, a lot of older adults who we worked with or who we interviewed for these studies, they actually accessed and used a variety of different tools, technologies from apps to devices, et cetera, to help accommodate themselves. They were self-accommodating without disclosing all the time. And they had all these neat things that were either sanctioned or unsanctioned. But the actual barrier to utilizing a lot of this stuff, because people know what helps them, right? Like we people find something and it works and then they use it. The barrier quite often is organizations and the systems and structures within them that are a barrier to adoption. So, they have their list of things that are okay and they go through their procurement process. But if a procurement process to get a security clearance on an app that enables you to record and helps with your memory, which is what a lot of folks need, takes 9 months. That's 9 months of performance management issues. And that's often what happened. And people would be dumped from, position to position, or they would leave in the interim. So there's a lot of systemic barriers to being able to use technologies to help extend, people's longevity at work that are not within their power. And it's really an organizational systemic changes that have to happen to create space for that. It's really challenging in a lot of workspaces like healthcare or government work where you're dealing with highly sensitive information, but there has to be a happy medium. So, there's not a lot of co-creation going on because there's a lot of barriers that aren't enabling people to, say, hey, this is what works for me and how can we get this in? It's usually quite a pretty hard stop. So that was one of the biggest problems for using tech in that space. And then the AI issue throws a whole new wrench into it. The healthcare work we're doing with AI-enabled technologies are showing that organizations have zero handle on just what's going on. And people are utilizing these tools regularly with a lot of security gaps that are actually meaningful. So at the same time, you've got to balance out, what's helpful versus also what might be detrimental from, a patient perspective, for example. So I think there are challenges on both ends, but I think there's a lot of room and a lot of talk now for how organizations and people are actually starting to have little groups on this and luncheons at organizations about these type of tools and how they can be used. Posters are going up in hospitals about why it's safe and not safe. So it's happening. It's just slow.
Very cool. And I think you've sort of preempted my next question a little bit. So let's continue this conversation thread. I'm going to go with Michelle first, then Emily, then back to Anne Marie. So when we're thinking about digital inclusion as, an economic and social determinant. So I'm a humanities person. So I'm going to say that right from the start. This is how I think about things. We see 88% of older adults in Canada using the internet every day. 65% of them own a smartphone. But this, as Anne Marie was saying, like this doesn't translate to what people are using it for, right? You can be a leisurely user of these digital tools. So you're not using it for e-health or banking or work. So back to that digital society piece, increasingly we see that access to services, to employment, to information, your pension stuff, like all of that now, all the social connection, of course, all of that depends on digital skills. So what's happening? Like what approaches are we seeing out there that are proving effective in closing that digital divide very specifically? Or are we not seeing anything really? Michelle, I'll start with you.
Terrific. Well, so yeah, my mind's kind of jumping all over the place. I would say, I think it's really important that we like be cautious about assuming that it's mature adults who are the less tech savvy. I think that the reality is that there's a ton of mature adults who are the most tech savvy at this point. And that there's lots of reasons for a digital divide, but it's not necessarily chronological age associated. When there are these kind of divides, I would say, remembering co-creating, that point came up, and I think that's a really important way of, working with individuals who are not using and figuring out why it is kind of different depending on different subgroups of people. There's always a financial element to that, and I want to really pick up on the point in the thread there about financial sustainability. I think that is a really great way of like pointing out the concerns that I have, which are about outliving your finances. And financial sustainability is a nice way to think about it, and also yeah, connecting it here to the question about how do you bring in people who are being left out, I think it's often a financial question, as opposed to like a skill or ability. There's also, cognitive issues that affect us differently. And so again, like co-creating, I think is the way to go there, thinking about that. The last thing I'll just point out is that I think there's a real threat with scams, online scams. And I think that there's a way to think about this as like we're leaving people out because people are either afraid of getting scammed through some kind of online, you were listing off like we might do banking, we might meet, we might connect with people online. And I think it's really important to point out that that is a real threat and that a lot of people associate at this point technology with scams and are losing significant amounts of money because of that. So I would say another piece of it, I'll leave it at like another piece of it from my perspective would be addressing fears and legitimate concerns about scams that are happening now online.
That's great, Michelle, and we're totally going there next too. So, Emily, I just want to get your and Anne-Marie's thoughts on this question, and then we'll move on to frauds and scams and privacy and misinformation and disinformation and all the things that are out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can't help but not answer this way, but I think, the way that we've designed Connected Canadians is very intentionally to try and help older adults to continue to have that learning mindset and to make it something that is an ongoing, pleasurable interaction for the folks that learn with us. And so, typically when people reach out to Connected Canadians, it's not just a one and done. It's we may have 12 sessions, we have 50 sessions, we have folks who've had over 100 sessions with the same or different mentors because they find that they really really enjoy this ongoing learning moment that they have week after week, but also it is helping them stay socially connected and helping them to feel more confident. And so I think just being able to create the conditions under which people want to learn is so incredibly important because you can make new technology all you want. But if older folks don't have that place to go and to be able to get the help that they need, that it's a fail, you know? And so Connected Canadians provides both in-person mentoring, which is really, really important because you can't just have a purely digital solution for folks that have never used the internet or a computer before. You can, you kind of can, but it becomes a lot more difficult. And so being able to have both in-person support as well as virtual support is key, and just making sure that it is something that people actually want to do, because that psychological aspect of wanting to learn and continuing to stay on top of things is hugely important in my opinion.
That's a fantastic point. When I think about pedagogy, when I think about teaching, that growth mindset is so important if you want anything to happen. Thank you. Anne-Marie.
Yeah, building on Emily's response, I think it maps on really beautifully to what's happening in workplaces with technology. Organizations are dropping in new, exciting technology that's going to change workflows and improve efficiency, and then they're dropping it and saying, start using this now. And people with 40 years of institutional knowledge and expertise are being like, early retirement is the way I'm going, because the stress of not having the training and the scaffolding in place to give them time to learn and practice, especially when you're dealing with, patient data, patient care, or dealing with sensitive information, the risk and stress it causes employees is massive, and people are opting out, or it's causing performance issues that they didn't have before. So having that training in place, and that kind of appreciative training where there's options to go back, and consistent mentorship and opportunities to brush up skills, I think is a necessity. You can't just, that's kind of that co-creation piece, and that checking in piece, and always looping back with people to see where they're at and what they need to sustain their performance like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we're going to build on that a little bit more, because when we think about frauds and scams and privacy and misinformation and disinformation and fake news and all the things, that can be scary, as Michelle said, right? And I'm wondering, how can we encourage that participation and engagement online and build out the digital confidence and the resilience? So how do we balance the digital participation while also discussing online risks realistically? How do we get past that fear of or distrust of technology in some ways to increase use in the workplace, or increase use for things like e-health and banking and things like that? So I will go Emily, Michelle, and Marie this time.
All right. I think in my mind, it's sort of that graduated scaffolding type of learning, and you have to feed people little bits of information that they can handle at a time, and if you're training somebody on something new, whether it's an online banking app or learning more about security, if you just dump a whole bunch of information on them at once, it's not going to be consumable for them. And so just being really, really cognitively aware of who you're dealing with, how much they can handle, and tailoring your content appropriately is very important. And just sort of being aware of the folks that you're working with too, and understanding that a lot of the older adults that we're working with are more vulnerable to scams because of the fact that they have more institutional trust than many of the younger generations. And so being able to kind of come at it, with a more a holistic perspective of all of the factors in play, and really address them in a tailored manner. And so, we at Connected Canadians, we do, of course, a lot of scam and fraud workshops, but we always follow that up with the offer of getting that one-on-one individual support, just to be able to even more appropriately tailor it to the folks that we're dealing with.
That's great. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, I don't think I could top that. Like, I really think that working with organizations where there's a known connection, and the opportunity to have this one-on-one support that Emily's describing, I mean, it doesn't get better than that. I really think the key is about trust, and it's really difficult in a digital environment to establish that. I think in terms of like trust of like setting scam aside, because I feel like I already shared that fear. And I think it's real. But in terms of like how to build trust on, technology and devices, I think, recognizing that we can use it in ways that it can talk to us now and it can like engage with different ideas. And, I know that sounds kind of out there, but I think just like building relationships with devices, like, conversations and using it to remind us about like what our schedule is and what our goals were, like basic stuff, some kind of device to let us know, like, okay, time to wake up. We already have that. Everybody's got an alarm, right? But now, like, remember, you wanted to brush your teeth in the mornings now. You wanted to, um, have this for breakfast. You want to then, call this friend and, keeping lists of like who it is that we want to engage in, asking us to play games that we are interested in. I think you know, that kind of relationship with devices is actually a way that eventually trust will be built. If the device can tell us a joke we appreciate or can remind us of a goal that we wanted to set or a person that we wanted to talk to, then that goes a long way towards building trust.
Anne-Marie.
Yeah, no, those are really, really thoughtful ideas too. Because thinking of that one, I just wrapped up a study where we gave older adults in the community kind of home pods. And we looked at how it was going to affect their well-being and our ability to age in place and the kind of trust and interaction and the kind of co-adaptation between how they use it over 6 months and how the machine responds to them over 6 months. And we saw a lot of people become quite conversational with it. And we actually had their transcripts of how they were speaking to the AI assistant. And like it changed over time. And they used language that was more appreciative and friend-like and conversational versus at the beginning where it was just like a list producer. So that's absolutely a really great idea for how technology can help outside of workspaces too. I think in our work, we really found too that like also being realistic about what technology can and can't do in certain contexts is really important about when it comes to trust. I think a lot of technology is dropped with the promise of that it's going to change everything, it's going to make everything easier and all these things, and then people potentially don't have a skeptical eye when interacting with it in a way that makes them more vulnerable or makes the work that they're doing more vulnerable to scam, or they trust it too much. Everyone's using generative AI, but we also know that there's tons of studies coming out about how it hallucinates the clinical notes it's making. There's multiple errors. There's all these things that like when you use it, you're using it for efficiency, but if you have to go back and check everything 3 times, then maybe it's not as effective. So like I think it's a balance between the two that gives people a perspective of, we want to use it for these purposes, but also you need to always consider these potential, drawbacks. It's not perfect.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, I feel like we can have this conversation for another hour and still be, slowly making our way through the many different aspects of this issue. So we have 16 minutes left. So I'm going to bring us back to the financial insecurity and digital exclusion piece of it and touch on something that I want to say Michelle and Anne-Marie brought up when you were thinking about adoption and implementation. So this kind of work, we need to move beyond awareness to action, right? So we have programs, but we need something a little bit more systemic. So if you had, and this is your wish list, what's one concrete step that governments, employers, community organizations, researchers, or industry, what should they really prioritize in the next 5 years if they really want to address digital exclusion and financial insecurity? One thing, if you wanted to see change from one sector, what's the one big thing you would like to see? See the thinky faces? All right, let's go. Anne-Marie, Emily, and then Michelle for this one.
Okay. I think thinking from the lens of workplaces and what's going on there, I think the largest dearth in terms of like what organizations have is time and resources to train their employees. Everything, the bottom line and getting things done is always what's driving things. And you can't blame executives or directors who have their own, priorities they need things done, but that's because there's systemic issues that are pushing that and that creating that culture. So I think that we want people to be able to stay at work longer, if we want them to be able to accrue enough to retire, reasonably, et cetera, I think we need to create space for training and education that doesn't exist. They say it exists on paper, it's there, they have training modules, but they don't have time to do those modules during work. They have spaces where you can go talk to people, but there aren't people available because that's off the side of the desk work they do. It's not their primary job. And so there that kind of void in especially large organizations is really where, unless we find time and money and especially at the federal level, if you look at federal versus municipal or private organizations, federal companies do way better. There are organizations that we worked with that have federal mandates to have these things in there. They have structure. They have accommodations groups. They have targets that they have to hit, and it's part of their to-do list that they have to meet. And other organizations who don't have that, the pressure is not there to do it. So I think imposing more structure on that front is a big one.
Thank you, Anne Marie. So we are looking at a future of work that is more inclusive and consciously so, where space is actually made. That's fantastic. Emily, what's your wish list?
Oh goodness, I have a big one. It's hard to just pick one, but I would say, definitely making sure that there's sort of multi-year funding to ensure that the findings could be operationalized, because I feel like it's awesome that we learn all of these things. These studies are so helpful to know about, but Connected Canadians started and has been running as a very lean organization, and there's many other organizations, not even actually there, I shouldn't say that. There aren't that many other organizations like us, but there's a lot of grassroots organizations that are trying to help. And if there were more sources of funds to help build the capacity so that people could go out into the community and actually support older adults, that would be amazing. So that's a big one. I would say as well, ensuring that regulators actually pay attention to the needs of older adults. There's on many different levels, not just accessibility standards, but also in terms of big telecom and things like that, to make sure that older adults are actually getting the services that they need in the ways that they need it. Because, just having access to a service doesn't necessarily mean that you have it or know how to use it. So, making sure that the government fully takes into account older adults and the huge proportion of our population that's aging, and makes those decisions and policies that we really need to have and that older adults deserve. Anyways, I could talk a lot more.
I want to get you a soapbox right now, Emily. You're speaking to my heart right now. As soon as you said, consistent multi-year funding,
Absolutely.
the researchers all just lit up in the room, right? This is something that's absolutely keen to all of us. So I want to
Yes.
ask you one follow-up question, and then we'll move to Michelle. So we actually have a question in the chat box that was asking about, are there other organizations that you know of that provide free or low-cost information the way that Connected Canadians does? Like, are there others?
Um, I know of another organization called Cyber Seniors, which also provides technology mentoring with high school students. Our model is a little bit different in that we actually have volunteers from about 18 or 19 to 92 years of age. We feel that mentors at every age can provide helpful experiences for folks, because it is really helpful for older adults to learn from peers as it is to have intergenerational mentoring. And so we encourage everyone to volunteer with us as they gain that capacity to feel tech savvy and explain things to others. So I think there aren't a lot. That's why we started it. That's why I'm still a volunteer CEO myself. I do have a small paid team now that helps support our operations, but definitely think there's room for growth in this area. Absolutely.
Thank you. And Michelle, what's on your wish list for the big change that you'd like to see? And from whom?
Well, I was thinking the direction would be intergenerational, and that's like maybe intergenerational period. Like, I think the funding, all of that, I'm just trying to say something that's different, because I really want to echo what Anne Marie and Emily said. But just to build on those ideas, I would say building intergenerational types of teams in the workplace, in, volunteer organizations, I think would go a huge way towards addressing ageism. But, like we learn by being with one another. It would help build trust. And I think if organizations did that, like took on the ideas of incorporating intergenerational models, we'd get more people understanding that nobody wants to be pushed out because they really reach a certain chronological age. Many of us can't afford to be pushed out. Our pension systems are not sustainable in that way. We haven't been forewarned, but by building intergenerational types of models, we'd help like get people on board earlier to understand what they need to do, but also to understand how we can like learn from one another. So that'd be if I had to say one, that'd be my one.
Fantastic. So I'm going to invite our audience to add their questions to the Q&A box. We did address a couple of the questions that were in the chat and in the Q&A already. So while people are typing, I'm going to ask you another question. That's one of those big vision questions, kind of like what I asked you before. And it's this: if we get this right, what does a financially secure, digitally inclusive future look like for older adults in Canada? Like, what does that even look like? I can't actually imagine what that would mean right now. So I'm looking to my experts here to tell me, what does that look like? We'll start with Michelle, and then we'll go to Anne-Marie, and then close off with Emily.
Oh, it's so much easier when I get to build off of, off of the others.
That's why you're first.
Yeah, so thinking about financially secure and digitally inclusive as like, combined, right? Which we are. I think it leaves more room for us to deal with the health shocks that come for most of us. It's really like the odd individual that gets away that, like we always say, we all will age if we're lucky enough to live long enough. But I feel like there's also a like sort of, and if we are lucky enough to live long enough and like not have a catastrophic health incident or even just like a slow chronic condition. So I think what it would, and I don't mean to be so pessimistic. I mean, I think it would look great. So let me say that. But I think it would also look like a space where we would have more capacity to deal with these unanticipated situations where there's a lot of room for improvement, and the chances are we're all going to need to adapt and deal with that. So it'd give us room for that.
That's a great point. A lot of this is unexpected, right? We're not thinking as a 20-year-old, as a 30-year-old, that our future includes caregiving in this way typically. And vice versa. My parents weren't thinking that their future included being supported by their children in this way at a young age. So that's so true. Anne-Marie, you're up next.
I think just building on what Michelle was saying is that like when you look at spending, when you look at what people care about, when we look at all the different ministries that are involved in supporting our kind of everything in Canada, what goes on for old age care, long-term care is it's like an afterthought. We don't invest, we don't sustain things publicly in a way that it makes it equitable for everyone to have access to it. We shouldn't have to, if you needed a parent to go into long-term care, somehow be able to have a third income bring in just to support that for decent care. And so the conditions to which we, expect that we treat our older adults in our community, I think is really a reflection of the value that we put on it. And it's quite poor in Canada. As much as we have some scaffolding, there's a lot to be desired on that front. And so I think if we actually put more investment and thought into what things are going to look like at a later period for most folks, that is, it's more inclusive, we wouldn't have kind of the sandwich generation issue where we're dealing with, but where the time you're 40 or 50, you are financially strapped, time strapped, and also physically you end up becoming ill yourself because you can't support a 60-hour work week every week plus weekends all the time. And so like I think it's just the social structures that fill in and using technology to support that to make it better for everyone. And aging shouldn't be it wouldn't have such a negative connotation that it does for so many people if we actually put stock and value into what those years can look like when you can live well, even with health conditions.
That's a beautiful answer, Anne-Marie. Thank you for sharing that. Emily, you're up next.
Yes, that it's such a good question. I think in terms of really thinking about what that looks like, I think we have to go back to that sense of who are we designing for and really incorporating their feedback into the design of technology and also really understanding, it's so beneficial for older adults to continue to be able to interact with technology and the internet and to be able to keep learning. And so if we can create experiences that are truly delightful for older adults. It's beneficial from a cognitive perspective as well. Not just from like the nuts and bolts of we'll save money if people start using online banking. It's actually could be helpful. So just really helping to make the big banks think about the fact that like if we design these with older adults in mind, it's a win-win situation, how can we actually make that online banking experience something that actually helps older adults cognitively instead of making it something that causes them fear and pain and anxiety. So, truly thinking, including the user base that they're trying to target in the design, in the testing that they do, and really changing their perspective as they go from the get-go. I worked for many years in software, and I understand it's usually very tight deadlines and not a lot of user feedback incorporated in these things. So I think just going back to be able to do that would help tremendously.
Great, thank you so much. So we have a question that was put in the chat box that personally I'm very interested in hearing your answers to this. So I'm going to take a little bit of the closing time to ask you guys this question. The question's actually for all panelists, but what they would like to know is, in your experience, where's the biggest gap between what we assume older adults need for digital literacy and what actually keeps them engaged? And beyond standard test scores, what specific indicators have you found that best predict long-term real-world behavior change? So that last question might be a little bit big, but the first one, I think we can all look at that. Like, what's the biggest gap that you've seen between what we think and what's real?
I can I can
Please.
start, I guess. I think from my perspective, a lot of the time people will generalize older adults as one homogenous population and try to say, okay, everybody over 65, let's like apply all the same design principles to them. And I think just that it's so important not to do that. And so being able to really understand that there are many different things that you are designing for when you're designing for an older adult population is really important. So anyways, I want to hear the other answers from folks too, so I'll be quiet.
Anne-Marie, I'm looking at you.
Sure. I can jump in. I think sometimes too we overemphasize that there are unique things that older adults need that are different from what other groups or generations or age cohorts need. I think generally everyone needs very simple user interfaces and things that they need the tool to match the task and fulfill, an actual purpose and do what it's supposed to do without very many errors. But I think there are more like tailored things that we don't talk about enough, like changes in proprioception, tactile stimulation that happen for older adults that actually are barriers to them just using a physical piece of technology or getting used to something like that are more unique that I think come down to like we need users at all levels to be thinking about how some of those physical changes can impact like sensory stuff like sight, all those things that might be more challenging as people age. Those are the type of things where if you have an app, if you have a tool, can it adapt? Can you build in ways to adapt? And can your technology build in ways to adapt and accommodate some of these changes that are actually real known physical changes that occur? But the actual apps itself or the tools or the technology itself, I think that universally everyone has a lot of very similar needs. And if we can just distill down what those are, I think principally there's a lot it's very similar across all the boards, but there are some more unique stuff that I think people don't think about or we don't pay enough attention to that really after someone tries to use a tablet 7 times and their fingers can't feel the perception or they don't feel, I think they just stop using it. And so then it becomes a barrier that could be easily addressed if it was thought about.
That's great. Thank you. Michelle, time
I
for your
would
mic drop
say
moment.
keep it fun. That's what keeps people engaged. Keep it fun. And indicators beyond test score, I would say exercise. Whether the person is exercising to the extent that it is feasible within the body they happen to be living in.
That's a good point. And I'm also feeling very seen in that comment. And we'll go for a walk later today. Thank you. So Alex Miolides seems to be missing in action right now, unfortunately. So I think I am going to give our quick closing remarks because we've already hit 1 o'clock. So I will start by saying my name is not Alex Miolides, and I am not the vice chair of research on the AgeWell board of directors. But I will say that it has absolutely been an epic 2 weeks, and I say that without laughing too much because we work the word epic into all of our jokes and puns here at AgeWell. Please join me in thanking all 48 presenters, including our, one third-year undergraduate university student who had never presented publicly before, all of our grad students, postdocs, research staff, stakeholders with lived experience, community partners for taking the time to share their exciting and collaborative work for us. We're thrilled with the leadership that we saw from our 7 challenge area session chairs who were all AgeWell ECRs, early career researchers. And of course, from our 3 panelists today. This year, as you know, we continue to highlight our startups and programs that are making a real world impact via our Moving the Dial session. So here's a shout out to PontoSense, to Curivate, to Azimuth Medical, Living Safe, Quantum Robotic Systems, Exit Ready Life, Vantech Med, and Connected Canadians. I'd also like to shout out my own program by saying that 3 of these startups received funding from the AgeWell Emerging Entrepreneur Awards, and we will be opening the AgeWell Entrepreneur Awards if anyone's looking for additional funding in a few weeks. Now, Alex is here, and he is ready to continue the closing by thanking our over 1,100 viewers, I should say, that have joined us over the past 2 weeks. Alex.
Hey everyone, sorry I'm late. I was having a little trouble getting Zoom up and running. When you go from Teams to Zoom and back and forth, I think your computer gets more confused than you are. So wonderful. So hi everyone. My name is Alex Miolides. I'm the Vice Chair of Research of the AgeWell Board of Directors and also the former CEO and Scientific Director of the network. And I'm also a professor here at the University of Toronto across several departments, including biomedical engineering, computer science, and occupational therapy. So I've been following everything online here and the various posts, and it seems, it's been an epic 2 weeks, and Sam always makes me use the epic in there as that pun there. So, but it's just been fantastic to kind of see what's been going on with this group and all the information that's come out. I said it's been a real pleasure to be following the work that all of you have been doing as part of our EPIC program, and also in terms of the mentors that have been there as well. So, over the last 2 weeks, we've been joined by over 1,100 viewers, which is incredible. Think about that, from across 13 countries on 6 continents. And again, this is not including the sessions or the YouTube recording, so we fully expect this number to grow even further. But this is really a testament to the commitment of this global community in supporting our trainees and technology for older adults and caregivers. And, in my role here at the university, I travel around the world, and first thing that always comes up in every conversation is technology and aging. And then we hear about AgeWell, and the great work that you're doing. So many of you know AgeWell trainees are amazing, and the EPIC conference is just one example of the thoughtful and innovative research that they are undertaking, and all of you are undertaking, obviously. Their collaborative presentations demonstrate the importance that these trainees place on working alongside people with lived experience in shaping the work that they do. Thank you to all the older adults and caregivers for supporting their work. They've been with us since day one, and they've always been a fantastic part of the network. Don't forget that you may watch replays of any of the sessions you missed. Links are on the EPIC conference webpage and the AgeWell YouTube channel. So as we close one door, basically other opportunities and other doors for you to work and to collaborate with AgeWell and to be part of the network continue to open up. So First off, as you see here, we welcome you to join us for the AgeWell 11th Annual Conference in Ottawa. It's November 2nd to the 4th, and the call for abstracts is open until the end of today, and registration is coming soon as well. So see the link. So basically go to the AgeWell website, and you'll see a conference link on there, and it's also on the homepage as well. So go there to check for more details. The second opportunity is Age Tech Discovery Day, which is on November 1st, which also is National Seniors Day. And so we'll be hosted in 10 locations across Canada, including a virtual session. These events will help older adults and caregivers discover the innovations that are enhancing their independence, health, and quality of life while creating opportunities to learn about and participate in research. And all are welcome. Participation is free of charge. And again, maybe Sam or someone will put the link. There we go. So with that, again, congratulations for making another successful event this year for our EPIC trainees and our EPIC programming in the conference. And hopefully I'll see you in Ottawa at the conference there. Feel free to come on out and say hi to me if we haven't met before, or even if we have met before, come and say hi. And with that, I think I'll hand it back to Sam.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Alex, to close things off. And let's call it a year. We'll see you guys next year at the next EPIC conference, but hopefully before that at some of our AgeWell webinars, seminars, and our in-person events that are coming up in October and November. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.